Life has a strange, relentless way of folding in on itself, revealing truths you once buried, resurrecting emotions you thought had long since faded. Just when you believe you've mapped out the terrain of your heart, some invisible force reroutes your course, pulling you back to the very place you thought you had outgrown. That was me. I thought I knew what I wanted, thought I'd carved out a stable, respectable life with my husband Ethan. But there I was, frozen in a moment of clarity so sharp it nearly cut me open, realizing that the man I had walked away from all those years ago might have been the one who truly understood the rhythm of my soul. I never imagined I'd find myself in that kind of moment, not after years of marriage, not after building a shared life, a routine, a home with Ethan, and yet it happened. It snuck up on me one ordinary evening, a night soaked in monotony, when nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and yet everything quietly unraveled. We sat together. In the living room, the television flickered dimly, murmuring some forgettable program into the air. Shadows danced lazily on the walls, while silence settled around us, not the comforting silence of intimacy, but the kind that echoes with all the things left unsaid. Ethan sat hunched forward, absorbed in his phone, his thumb scrolling endlessly. I sat next to him, fidgeting with the frayed hem of my old cardigan, my thoughts drifting aimlessly through memories and doubts. Something inside me had shifted. It had been building for months, maybe years, a quiet ache I couldn't name, a feeling of loss that didn't come from a death or a departure, but from something far more haunting. Disconnection. The intimacy that once bonded us had dulled to a flicker. The spark that once kept us alive had burned low, and I couldn't ignore that I had played a part in that slow unraveling. What haunted me most wasn't Ethan. It was the ghost of someone else, Daniel. My first love. The man who had haunted the back of my mind with increasing persistence. He was the wild one, the unpredictable, untamable force of nature who once made my heart feel like it would burst from my chest. I'd let him go in the wake of a fiery argument, both of us too young, too headstrong to bend toward each other's dreams. I told myself I moved on. I told myself Ethan was what I needed: stability, kindness, a future I could count on. And for a while, I believed it, or wanted to, but I couldn't lie to myself anymore. That night, the words came before I could catch them. I should have stayed with Daniel, I said, the confession slipping from my lips like a whisper and a scream all at once. The moment the words left me, I felt the air shift. Ethan looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable, his brow furrowed slightly, but there was no anger, no raised voice, no accusations, just a long, harrowing silence. And then he stood, walked to the closet, grabbed his jacket, and without a single word, walked out the door. The sound of it closing behind him was deafening. I sat there stunned, my pulse thundering in my ears. I hadn't expected him to leave, not like that. But beneath the shock, a quiet sense of relief settled into my bones, as if a door had finally creaked open, as if something dormant inside me had been awakened by truth long denied. The days that followed blurred into each other. Ethan didn't come back. He didn't call. His phone rang straight to voicemail. I had no idea where he went. It wasn't like him to disappear. He always confronted things head on. At least the man I married did. But now, he was just gone. The house felt hollow, cold. Every corner of it whispered with memories, but none of them offered comfort. I was left alone with the weight of my choices. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Had I chosen wrong all those years ago? Did I really pick Ethan because I loved him? Or was it because I was too afraid to weather the storm Daniel carried in his wake? Maybe I'd mistaken stability for happiness, safety for love. I began to look back, obsessively. I dug through old photo boxes, reread faded letters, scrolled through ancient messages. Anything that tied me back to Daniel. Back to the girl I was with, him, carefree, radiant, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. He had challenged me, lit me up, dared me to dream out loud. We were chaotic, passionate, flawed, but we were real. I gave it all up for a man who was safe and steady. Ethan had been the practical choice. But maybe love wasn't meant to be practical. Weeks passed and still, Ethan didn't return. My messages to him remained unanswered. One afternoon, with a trembling hand and a hollow chest, I left a voicemail apologizing for what I said, trying to explain that I didn't mean to hurt him. But I didn't lie. I couldn't. A part of me had meant it. I had to face that night in a daze. I opened my laptop and found myself mindlessly browsing social media, a habit I'd nearly abandoned. On impulse, my fingers typed Daniel's name. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a public profile, maybe a photo or two. But there it was, a message waiting. "Hey, it's been a while." My heart skipped. My breath hitched. I stared at it for several minutes before typing. "It sure has. Simple, safe." But it was enough. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, where life had taken us, what we'd built, what we'd lost. He told me about his travels, the businesses he started, the people he'd met. I told him fragments of my life with Ethan, carefully editing out the raw edges. There was no mention of my marriage falling apart. It felt sacred to keep that part unspoken. But it wasn't just nostalgia. We fell into each other like no time had passed. We laughed easily, revisiting shared memories like worn pages in a favorite book. Then he said something that froze me. "I've always wondered what would have happened if we'd stayed together." The words landed like thunder. My hands trembled above the keyboard. "Me too," I typed. And suddenly the screen blurred as tears welled in my eyes. In that moment, I realized I had been starving for connection, for truth, for something real. I'd spent so long pretending everything was fine, building a quiet, predictable life with Ethan. But I had locked away the parts of myself that once knew how to burn with passion. Daniel had lit that fire again, just by reminding me it had once existed. Love, I realized, wasn't always about comfort. Sometimes it's about risk, about fire, about the kind of connection that forces you to confront your truth instead of hiding from it. I didn't know where this left me. I didn't know if Daniel and I could find a way back, or if this was just a fleeting reconnection with the past. But I knew one thing. I couldn't go back to the silence, to the stillness, to a marriage that had crumbled long before I ever dared admit it. Sometimes the hardest part is acknowledging what your heart has been whispering all along. That maybe you settled, that maybe, in chasing the calm, you let go of the storm that gave your life meaning. But now I knew, and I was ready, terrified, but ready to find out if it was too late to reclaim the love I once let slip through my fingers.